Okay, and as soon as Gloria gets back, I will start the webinar and we will be live. Okay, and we are going live in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, everyone. We'll be getting started in about 3 minutes. During this town hall, we're using the Zoom webinar platform, and you'll have the opportunity to participate in comments in the discussion period by clicking the raise hand icon located at the bottom of your screen. This will add you to our speaker list during that time. And when called upon, and when called upon, you'll have the option to turn your video on and unmute yourself to ask your question. If you experience any technical difficulties, we recommend leaving the meeting and then rejoining. Often that will resolve any audio or video issues that you may be having. And this session will be recorded. It will be posted on the Missing Person Review website in the coming days. We'll be getting started very shortly. Thank you everyone for joining. We will be getting started in about 1 minute. And during the town hall, there will be an opportunity for you to participate during the discussion and comments period. At that point, you will have the opportunity to unmute your microphone and turn on your video should you wish to by clicking the raise hand icon located at the bottom of your screen. This session will be recorded. It will be posted in a few days on the Missing Persons Review website. And if you experience any technical difficulties during this time, please do leave the meeting and then rejoin. Often that will resolve any audio or video issues that you may be having. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll be getting started in just a moment.
So just want to see if my audio's on, Andrea. Okay. All right. Well, I do like a meeting that starts on time. So thank you for everyone who has joined already. Welcome. And my name is Jane Farrell. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the context for tonight, a bit about the agenda, and then I'll hand it over to Justice Epstein and lead counsel Mark Sandler. So basically this evening, this is the town hall. It's the town hall for the Independent Civilian Review into Missing Person Investigations, being led by the Honorable Gloria Epstein, who is a retired judge of the Court of Appeal of Ontario. As I said, I'm Jane Farrell. My pronouns are she and her, and my firm, the Department of Words and Deeds, has been supporting and facilitating the review's public engagement work for the last year and a half. Our job is not to advocate or, for a particular outcome or a perspective about these issues that we'll be discussing tonight, but merely to get people to the table to help them be heard and have an impact. Tonight, I'll be moderating and facilitating the comment and discussion section of the proceedings. This town hall is focused on hearing how the Toronto Police Services can promote and practice bias-free missing person investigations, particularly as they relate to the LGBTQ2S+ communities and vulnerable or marginalized communities. We'll have an hour and a half together, starting with brief remarks from the independent reviewer, Judge Gloria Epstein, followed by a presentation from lead counsel Mark Sandler, and approximately 50 minutes of comments and feedback from you. We will be recording the town hall, as Andrea has mentioned, and posting it on our project website. The media is also here tonight, covering this event. So if you do make a comment, please know that you're effectively on public record. Of course, there are many ways to, and have been many ways to contribute to the review's proceedings. This will be gone over in detail in Mark Sandler's presentation. To participate, people will be put in a speakers list. They'll raise their hand. Andrea will show us how to do that with the Zoom technology just before we go into the discussion section, so it'll be fresh in your mind. People can choose to offer feedback by audio only, or they can choose to be seen on the screen as well. I mean, bear with us, it's clearly no substitute for an in-person event. As much as we can make this transparent and show you, we're up for that if you're participating by laptop or smartphone. This town hall represents the culmination of the public engagement process that Mark Sandler, as I was saying, will review in detail. And while it's the last formal opportunity to share your experiences and feedback publicly, there is an email portal on the project website where you can continue to send comments this fall. That address is info@missingpersonsreview.ca. But again, we'll go over the process that has unfolded to date. So now I'd want to say a few words about the woman who's heading the review. The Honorable Gloria J. Epstein was appointed to the Ontario Superior Court in 1993 and has served as a judge of the Ontario Court of Appeal since 2007. In her 25 years on the bench, Judge Epstein has presided over a wide range of trials and appeals covering many areas of the law. Among her more noteworthy cases is the landmark 1999 decision, M versus H, involving a lesbian couple seeking a divorce. Judge Epstein ruled at the trial level that the exclusion of same-sex couples from the definition of common law spouse violated the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The provincial government appealed. Some of you might remember that. The Supreme Court upheld it and thus paved the way for many LGBTQ2S+ legal advances to come. For that, I salute you. It's been an honor to work with you, Justice Epstein and the team, facilitating and gathering substantial contributions from the community and organizations over this process. So now over to Judge Epstein.
I, for one, certainly remember the appeal, but I also remember the case going up to the Supreme Court of Canada. It was quite a time in our history. It seems like yesterday. But we've made a lot of progress since then. And I think what we've been involved in the last few years is also all about progress. Before I go on, I'd like to make it clear that my pronouns are she and her. And I also want to thank everyone for joining us here today. As Jane said, this is no substitute for being together, but it's the best we can do in a pandemic. And I'm just grateful for all the support the review team and I have received in making this happen, and for all of you for taking the time out of your evening. I do hope you and your loved ones are staying safe as we deal with challenges of COVID. As we gather for this meeting, let's take a minute to reflect on the meaning of place. And in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands from which we are engaging today. Some of us are in different locations, but we gather virtually on the sacred land on which the review is actually taking place. Land that is situated on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe Nation, Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. I recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous people on and of this land, who share with us the privilege to live, work, and enjoy all that this land has to offer. It is with gratitude and respect that we acknowledge the elders, past, present, and emerging, and their ancestral spirits of all the land we live on. I'll start things off with a few words before turning the screen over to Mark Sandler, lead counsel to the review. First, I'd like to introduce members of my community advisory group, leaders of the community who have formed an integral part of the review by offering their guidance and their insight. Their participation in this review, right from the start, has been vital, as these leaders have provided the connection in the sense of lived experience in the affected communities, experiences that have been essential to making this review a complete and legitimate exercise. So I thank them for the support, and I'm just going to take a minute to introduce each of them. Ron Rosnes, Haran Vijayanathan, Judge Brian Lennox, Michelle Kent, Krista Big Canoe, Angela Robertson, and Monica Forrester. I thank each of them for joining us in this town hall this evening. Now, when Mark has the floor, so to speak, he's going to describe the work of the review to date, the issues for consideration, and one component of our research, namely the results of an engagement survey we conducted on the matters that define this review. This is the first time that we will have shared any of those findings, and my hope is that sharing this information will not only give you a sense of where our work has been concentrated, but also offer you a concrete basis to respond this evening with your views, your questions, and most important, your recommendations. In that respect, I want to say something off the start. I know, and if I didn't know before this review began, I certainly know it now, that sharing your experiences, your concerns, your ideas in a public fashion takes courage, takes guts. As was the case throughout the entirety of our outreach and our engagement, I'm here to listen. And I really want to thank you for the opportunity to do so. I want to say a couple of things about the review's mandate and terms of reference. The review was created because 10 people died. 10 people from Toronto's LGBTQ2S+ communities who were loved and appreciated by their families, their friends, their communities. 8 of those people died at the hands of Bruce McArthur, a serial killer who targeted the village and the LGBTQ2S+ communities. Compounding the shock of what happened to these 10 souls and the disappearance of others are long-standing anxieties in the communities about the Toronto Police Service investigations in general, and the investigations into the disappearances in particular. In the Toronto Police Service, are there issues of longstanding bias, conscious or unconscious, toward the communities? Can people in Toronto's LGBTQ2S+ communities expect the same level of policing support as anyone else in any other part of our city? All of this is intertwined with a long, complicated history, a history that has fostered mistrust. To help overcome that mistrust, I must make recommendations, not that are broad and abstract, but that will actually ensure change. My mandate is to report on the ways in which policing must change if we're to ensure that the LGBTQ2S+ communities in this city feel that the Toronto Police Service is treating them fairly. This work was important when it began, but in the time since my appointment, with the defunding movement, the troubling US examples of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many others, the review's work has become even more important. I personally feel an enormous pressure and an enormous opportunity to take advantage of this moment and to make a lasting difference. As Jane said, I spent a quarter of a century as a judge, sitting in robes, listening to evidence, writing decisions. I truly value those years. But the reason I'm here in this role is that I knew while the bench drew me close to our community, in a way, it also kept me slightly removed from it. I really saw this review as a chance to step from behind that bench and involve myself in the experiences that happen outside the court, experiences in which I will have a broader impact, hopefully on all of us. Simply put, I left my career as a judge and took on this review so I could make the kind of impact that can't be achieved through any individual decision. And I truly believe that my talented, hardworking team and I are on track to produce that kind of work. But to do this job well, I need you to help me understand the whys of what has gone on in order that I can correctly identify the whats that must be done in order to make things better. On that, I'll turn things over to Mark Sandler, who is truly my partner in this undertaking. I won't recite Mark's resume, but take my word for it. Mark is a respected lawyer known throughout the country. What you should know in particular is that Mark has much experience in roles of this sort. He has led many such reviews and inquiries, and in doing so, Mark has achieved a reputation for being unafraid to challenge authority and for being brutally effective when it comes to telling it like it is. Some of you may be aware of his work in Thunder Bay, where his participation in a review of the way in which that police service engaged with Indigenous peoples led to meaningful wholesale change. Truly, I could not be asking to work with someone with a better track record of insight, of creativity, and yes, of bravery. Before I turn you over to Mark, one more thing. I just want to make something clear. I'm here to listen. I'm here to listen to you, to learn from you. Although I've been developing opinions, and in some cases strong opinions, about the issues raised in this review, I am the reviewer, specifically the independent reviewer, and to maintain that independence, it is important that I not share my opinions until all of the evidence is in, until I have thoroughly considered all of the issues in the light of that evidence, until I release the report. So this evening, I will assume the role as a listener, an active listener, but nonetheless, exclusively as a listener. So now's the time. That over to my lead counsel and friend, Mark Sandler.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for the kind words, Gloria. They are much appreciated. I do use the pronouns him and he, and I am very pleased and honored to be addressing all of you this evening. I'm going to do three things tonight and hopefully do it in a compact way so that we'll have an opportunity to hear from you. The first thing that I'm going to do is outline the work that we have done to date so that you have some sense of the scope and the nature of the work that has been accomplished since our review commenced. The second thing that I'm going to do is identify a number of the issues that Judge Epstein will be dealing with in her final report. And the third thing that I'm going to do is share with you some of the concerns expressed by community when we surveyed community members in the last year. So I want to start with the work that we have accomplished to date. And I'm going to divide up our work into various components. So I'll start with our community outreach and engagement. Judge Epstein has chosen to meet personally with many members of the community. Before COVID-19 struck, we were doing so in community locations, in safe and welcoming environments for all concerned. We were respecting confidentiality when confidentiality was sought by those with whom we spoke. We engaged in our outreach in a whole variety of ways. We did it through the in-person meetings. We did it through written comments that people provided to us. They had a choice of doing so anonymously or with attribution. We did it through written submissions that we've received from organizations and groups. We did it through consultation with community leaders. We did it through an engagement survey that I'm going to tell you a little bit more about. And as a result of those efforts, not including today's town hall, Judge Epstein has heard from over 1,200 people in the community about their life experiences and about their perspectives on the issues that we are addressing. And broadly based, we're addressing two key issues. Though for those of you who have reviewed our terms of reference, you'll know that they are very detailed and the breadth of our work is substantial. The two issues being, how have the Toronto Police conducted missing persons investigations, and how do they continue to conduct missing persons investigations, particularly in relation to vulnerable and marginalized communities, and particularly in relationship to the LGBTQ2S+ communities. And second of all, how would one describe the relationship between the Toronto Police Service and our diverse communities, and what changes should be made to ensure that it is a healthy relationship. When we were mandated to do this work, it was acknowledged that that relationship is a troubled one and is deserving of the kind of attention that we have given it over the last number of months. In addition to our community outreach, we have collected and analyzed documents. We have had access to documents that are unavailable to the public. So I expect that our report will tell you about evidence that is otherwise inaccessible to you or has been inaccessible up until this point in time. We have examined over 86,000 pages of documents, many of which involve operational details on the specific investigations that we are examining, as well as policies, practices, and procedures of the Toronto Police Service. And we have had full access to the documents that we have requested. And I should say, because I've been asked this question in the course of several media interviews, we've also had full access to any audio or videotapes that were taken or that are in the possession of the police in connection with these investigations. In addition to the collection of documents and the analysis of those documents, we have interviewed about 235 people, including 25 either former or current Toronto police officers, civilian employees, community members, stakeholder groups, and we've consciously made an effort to ensure that our full, diverse communities are represented, whether they be racialized, Indigenous, LGBTQ2S+, homeless or underhoused, persons in crisis, or dealing with mental health or wellness issues, refugees, new immigrants, the young, students, and those generally who are marginalized or vulnerable. So that even though our prime focus has been by necessity on the LGBTQ2S+ community, Judge Epstein is mindful of the fact that we are looking more generally at the relationship that the Toronto Police Service has or does not have with vulnerable or marginalized communities generally. Then, in addition to that, I've indicated that we've received written submissions, and those written submissions are still coming in from several legal organizations together with community organizations. And I have to tell you, they run the spectrum of opinions, and that's exactly the way we wanted it. Judge Epstein can only make meaningful recommendations if she understands the full scope of views and perspectives that exist in the community. We had 40 people participate in a policy roundtables that lasted 2 full days with diverse community leaders and with police officers from other jurisdictions. And at the end of that 2 days of policy roundtables, each of the participants provided us with their recommendations for change. If they, to use the expression that Judge Epstein uses throughout her interviews, if you ruled the world, what do you want to see happen? We've commissioned 4 papers, which are available on our website, that deal with topics of importance to our review. They include the history and ongoing relationship between the LGBTQ community and Toronto Police, and the historical events and the legacy that pertains to them. They include similar report on racialized LGBTQ community and the relationship of those communities to police, and other papers. Our robust research program, headed up by Professor Kent Roach, has also looked at best practices around the world, because it's important that we learn from experiences elsewhere. And one of the things that we have learned is that other jurisdictions, whether it be Scotland or Vancouver or Edmonton or Saskatoon, other jurisdictions are doing certain things differently, very differently in some instances, from the way the Toronto Police are doing them, and that's going to inform Judge Epstein's recommendations. We have examined many pages of existing reports. These include the Opal report on the Robert Pickton serial killings, and you'll see, stopping there, that many of the themes developed by Judge Opal in his report have relevance to the issues that we are examining here in Toronto. We've examined the national inquiry into murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, and we've had the benefit of having counsel to that inquiry. Krista Big Canoe is a member of our community advisory group. We've examined, of course, the Office of the Independent Police Review Director's report, Broken Trusts, on the Thunder Bay Police Service's relationship with the Indigenous communities. And as you've heard, I didn't have to examine it in great detail since I was counsel to that review. We've looked at reports commissioned by the Police Services Board and the police, including the Way Forward report. And we've looked most recently at the Ontario Human Rights Commission's reports on anti-Black racism and its impact in Toronto. Those are just some of the reports that we've been examining as well, to see what lessons can be learned, and frankly, to ask the question whether the lessons learned from prior reports have been understood in Toronto. We've examined practices in policing around the globe, as I've said, and we've met with officers in Vancouver, Seattle, Saskatoon, Edmonton, Winnipeg, the OPP, Kenora, Scotland, Thames Valley in England, Peel, and we've examined their practices, both in relation to missing persons and also in relation to relationship building. We've consulted with experts on community policing, and we've consulted on alternative models to policing, human rights, racism and homophobia, As I've said, the history of the relationship between police and the LGBTQ2S+ communities, racialized communities, and vulnerable and marginalized communities generally. And by the way, I want to emphasize here that we are all too mindful of the fact, and we are reminded of this every day when we meet with community members, that people do not self-identify by a single demographic. So that the life experiences of a Black trans woman may very well be different than the life experiences of a Caucasian, white, heterosexual male. This report will be far-ranging. There's no doubt about it, given our terms of reference and the breadth of the issues to be addressed. I'm not going to tell you what Judge Epstein is going to say in terms of her findings or her recommendations for the reasons that she has already indicated, but I am going to tell you what issues that we are going to address. Judge Epstein is going to explain to you what happened in the MacArthur-related investigations. And by the MacArthur-related investigations, I'm referring to not only Project Houston and Project PRISM, which have been referred to extensively in the media, but the individual and separate investigations into a number of the disappearances of missing men that ultimately were MacArthur's victims. We're also looking at events that took place in 2001 when Mr. MacArthur was convicted of an offense against an unsuspecting member of the community. And we're also looking at the events of 2016 when he attempted to choke a member of the community as well. So we're looking at the full range of activities that involve MacArthur, with a view to describing not only what happened, but evaluating what was done and what was not done by police. And though much has been written about these investigations, as I've said earlier, I expect that there'll be quite a bit that'll be new to the public, especially given our access to the complete operational details around these investigations. We're going to examine and report on the missing persons component of the Tess Ritchie investigation. We're going to examine and report on the missing person component of the Alora Wells investigation and describe the disconnected times that exist and has been acknowledged to exist between people who are reported missing and the identification of their bodily remains. We've seen a number of instances in which people who love those who have gone missing and are searching for them in the community do not know that their bodily remains have already been located and are resting at the morgue. We have to make recommendations to ensure that that never happens. This is all part of an evaluation of the service's relationship with our diverse communities. We're giving particular attention to the LGBTQ2S+ community and particular attention as well to the trans community and the real challenges that have been identified in relation to those issues. Judge Epstein's also going to report on how missing persons cases were being investigated or not being investigated, more generally, and not just with reference to these specific investigations, both before MacArthur and after the creation of a missing persons unit in Toronto. She will evaluate the current missing persons unit, and she will discuss with you in her report whether priority has been given, deserved priority has been given to missing persons cases, and if not, why not, and what should change. Now, I want to tell you that well before the George Floyd case brought heightened attention to the role of police in the community, we were already examining that issue. And more particularly, we were already examining whether alternative models should be employed for how missing persons cases are dealt with. Right now, the entire missing persons portfolio is largely that of the Toronto Police. And it has been suggested that this portfolio ought to either be removed from the Toronto Police or at least shared in a meaningful way with independent social agencies or other community agencies because so many of the missing persons cases that are examined have so little to do with criminality and have so much to do with other issues that the city is wrestling with. So you can see that this dovetails precisely with the issues that have been raised in the public discourse in the last half year. In addition to all of that that we are looking at, we're also looking at the implications of all of that to other issues that police currently deal with, including mental health and homelessness. So it is our view that although our review is largely focused on missing persons investigations, it will have relevance, important relevance, more generally to the role of police in dealing with social issues. I've already said that we're going to deal with the relationship between vulnerable or marginalized communities and the Toronto Police. Judge Epstein's going to describe it. She's going to explain why it's problematic and make recommendations for change. She's going to address a variety of topics that are related to everything that I have said. She's going to address how police do and do not use technology to identify predators. And she's going to discuss whether technology was effectively used to identify MacArthur as a serial killer. She's going to describe the interaction between the Toronto Police Service and other police services and whether a siloed environment continues to exist that has to be addressed. As many of you know, the Peel Regional Police conducted the initial investigation into Mr. Faizi's disappearance, while at the same time Toronto was conducting an investigation into the disappearance of Mr. Navaratnam and then Mr. Kayan, all the victims of MacArthur's killing. We're also looking at the role of the Toronto Police Services Board in providing effective oversight. We're looking at discipline and accountability. We're looking at police culture, and we're looking at the role of advisory groups or committees in policing. So here, the town hall represents our last community engagement. And as Judge Epstein says, this is an opportunity for us to hear from you. We will not be providing our recommendations today, since our work is not yet complete, but we wanted to describe our process. Now, I also wanted to give some context to the work that we've done by spending just a few moments telling you about an engagement survey, which is one of the tools that we used in our work. And I'm going to ask Andrea to put up on the screen a very brief PowerPoint that reflects our community engagement survey. And if you would go to the next slide, please, Andrea. We conducted this survey from November to May. We call it an engagement survey because this is not intended to be and is not being used to represent statistically how people across Toronto feel about the issues, but instead as a tool for people to engage with us and express their views. We were gratified to receive 985 completed responses. If you go to the next slide, you'll see, and I don't expect you to master these slides as they flash before you very, very quickly, like flashcards in early child learning. But the essence of this slide tells you that we received the perspectives of our diverse communities, more women than men, but healthy representation from all demographics across the board. And that was important to us. For example, more than 200 respondents identified as members of the racialized or visible minority. Many members who responded self-identified in a variety of ways as members of the LGBTQ2S+ community. If we could go to the next slide, please. What we learned is that for those who were responding to our survey, nearly half of all respondents have little or no confidence in the Toronto Police Service when it comes to conducting missing persons investigations effectively. 42% said that they had no confidence or little confidence, and 45% in relation to bias-free policing. Those who have dealt with the Toronto Police Service in the last decade, so we asked them to split out their experience, whether they've dealt with the Toronto Police in the last 10 years or not, have less confidence in the service overall. And you can see those numbers there. Those who have reported a missing adult to police also have less confidence in the process. 36% said that they had little or no confidence in the Toronto Police Service overall, and 47% said that the Toronto Police Service performed poorly when it comes to acting in a non-biased manner in the course of the investigation. Next slide, please. The Toronto Police Service received relatively lower scores on bias-free policing and missing persons than on overall public safety. And what you'll see here is that the gray signifies no confidence at all. And you'll see that the gray portions of the chart are more pronounced when people were being asked about whether the police were providing timely, non-biased investigations or effective and bias-free missing persons investigations. Next slide, please. Those who had recent interactions with the TPS, and I indicated to you that we did divide in the survey those who had more recent experiences from those whose experiences were less current, showed similar levels of confidence or lack of confidence. And you'll see, for example, that 36% of the respondents had little or no confidence that police would respond to a call or to a report in a timely fashion. Or 39% had little or no confidence that police would conduct their work in a non-biased manner. The next slide. Less than half of those respondents have confidence in the ability of the Toronto Police Service to work with the LGBTQ2S+ community, visible minority, and immigrant communities, and have little or no confidence in the ability to work with underhoused, Indigenous people, and those with mental health issues. Some of those who are participating in the town hall today will look at these survey results and say, tell me something that I don't know. This does support what we've also been told in community sessions, but it's important that in this broad engagement survey to get some sense of the number of people who are expressing little or no confidence in the Toronto Police Service. Next slide, please. There are substantial differences, and I'm not going to break down all of the demographics tonight, or even most of them, but there are substantial differences by gender, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression when it comes to levels of confidence. And if I had to highlight two particular issues, you see heightened levels of lack of confidence within the LGBTQ2S+ communities and heightened levels of lack of confidence, particularly in young respondents. Next slide, please. 1 in 5 of the respondents reported someone missing or information about a missing person's case to police. And what we see is that the lion's share of those cases involved reporting somebody who had gone missing with mental health or addiction-related issues. That's an important fact for Judge Epstein to know, because so many missing persons investigations intersect with mental health, people in crisis, or wellness issues. And so her recommendations have to be mindful of that. Next slide, please. Those who dealt with the Toronto Police Service of a missing persons case tended to be negative on balance, especially when it came to the ability of police to work in a non-biased fashion. And you'll see the gray areas here that correspond to what I've indicated by way of an overview. Next slide, please. 12% of respondents have chosen not to approach police about a specific missing person case. This group tends to be younger and more likely to be transgender or non-binary. And we received a number of reasons for why people were not approaching police about a missing adult. A belief that the police would not take matters seriously, a lack of comfort with the police, concern about how their personal information would be used. And those identifying as LGBTQ2S+ were concerned about how information respecting their identity or orientation or gender expression would be used. So they expressed concern about how that information would be used, the privacy of health or mental health information, and concern about treatment of visible minorities, because we see the intersection between the LGBTQ2S+ community and racialized respondents in this survey as well. Next slide, please. So respondents provided a number of suggestions to us on what Judge Epstein should be considering to overcome barriers to reporting on missing persons. More generally, a number of people described the need for better training, prevention, work on overcoming bias, and establishing unbiased rapport, improving policies and third-party reporting, and the like. And all of these will be considered, obviously, by Judge Epstein, together with the feedback she's received from community groups. Next slide, please. We also see LGBTQ2S+ respondents identifying building trust, better training, overcoming bias as important steps in improving relationships between their communities and the Toronto Police Service. Next slide, please. So I've tried to make clear, and I'll repeat, that this survey is certainly not representative of the Toronto population or even the LGBTQ2S+ communities. This is not intended to be a statistical survey. Indeed, statistical surveys or more representative polling that's done generally has significantly higher levels of confidence reflected in the community at large towards the Toronto Police Service. But what this survey tells us is several things. First of all, the raw numbers, leave aside the percentages, the raw numbers of those who have expressed little or no confidence in the police on the important areas that are the subject of our work tells us that so much work has to be done. And it also tells us that specific groups have pronounced concerns with a particular emphasis on younger people and a particular emphasis on the LGBTQ2S+ respondents. Though concerns about bias-free policing go well beyond the younger or the LGBTQS+ respondents, there's a broad concern that was expressed in this survey about the service's ability to serve visible minority, mental health, at-risk people. Next slide, please. Actually, that's the last slide. So that gives you some sense of what the engagement survey told us. It's just one of the many tools that we're employing. We also have access to representative surveys that have been done by other organizations. And I do want to take the opportunity to thank the Gandalf Group, led by Alex Swan, for the work in creating this survey and implementing it and in analyzing the results. So as next steps, we hear from you yet again at the final stages of our review. We have a few interviews to do, and then we're on to the continuation of the report writing, which is in progress. And I expect that this report, well, I know that this report will be publicly released. We've already been advised by the Toronto Police Services Board that the report will be publicly released on its completion. It will contain findings, it will contain recommendations, and it will also contain a strategy for implementing those recommendations and for ensuring that there is accountability for the implementation. So that's a little bit about our work, or a lot about our work, and I'm going to turn it back over to Jane. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sandler. Okay, we have a period of time now for your comments and observations and perspectives. I want to bring my Zoom tech, Andrea, back in here to do a quick primer on how people can get in the speaker's line, raise their hand. So over to you, Andrea.
Great. Thank you, Jane. I see some people have already raised their hand. So during this next portion of our meeting, you will have the opportunity to get on the speaker list by clicking the raise hand icon, which is located just at the bottom of your screen. Once called upon, you will have then the ability to unmute your microphone. And if you wish, also turn on your video and make your comment or ask your question at that time. So with that, I will turn it over to Jane, and we will begin this portion of the meeting.
All right. I'd like to go to Reverend Karen Harrison, who has her hand up. Now, Andrea, you can give her the choice to be on video.
Absolutely. So she's coming online now,
Okay,
and you
great.
may press unmute to ask your question.
Yes, thank you very much for this town hall. We, at the beginning of this investigation and inquiry, asked to be included as a very vulnerable minority community. May I identify myself as being an LGBTQ plus Buddhist woman minister and the director of the Canadian Buddhist Civil Liberties and Human Rights Association. We, for 153 years, have sought inclusion in these discussions. I am the granddaughter of an inspector police officer who served the Toronto Police Services, and I am part Indigenous, and proudly so. It is very disturbing to myself and to my community that we are only able to have our input at a community town hall at a late stage of this report and review. And we wish to be included in the future. May I assure you that we have had many of our community go missing. And when we have gone to the Toronto Police, we are not even recognized as human beings. In fact, may I say, there are really deep problems within the whole justice system in Canada in regards to acknowledging the human rights and civil rights of Canadian Buddhists across the country. So once again, we feel great disappointment in our community for not being included in these discussions, but we are glad to be here today, and we look forward to working much more strongly in the future to making our voices heard as a minority group of people, as a diverse group of people, and has a very vulnerable group of people in Canadian society still after 153 years. Thank you very much for hearing me.
And thank you, Reverend Karen Harrison, for those remarks.
So I was just going to say, Reverend Harrison, that anybody who wishes to speak to us is being given an opportunity to speak to us. So if you go on to our website, you will see that there's an email address there. And if you contact me through that email address, I will make sure there's still, we still have several months to go. I will make sure that you are heard. So please contact me and we will make that arrangement. Thank you.
And if you have a pen handy right now, I can tell you that email address is info@missingpersonsreview.ca. Of course, the website is missingpersonsreview.ca. So contact form there. It's anonymous as well. If people want to put anonymous contacts or comments in there that are untraceable, we are open for business in that regard as well. Next person, Anthony Mohammed, please, who has their hand up.
Okay, so just a moment here. Anthony will be joining us. Welcome, Anthony. You are welcome to ask your
Okay.
question.
Sorry, can I be heard?
Yes, we hear you, Anthony.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh,
Sorry.
and we see you. Great. Thank you. Hello.
Okay, so good evening, everyone, and thank you to everyone involved with the review. And this is excellent information that we didn't have before. I really appreciate the care that the review commission and everyone involved with the reports has taken to include the diversity of the queer and trans communities. And so congratulations to all of you for that. I did review the report on your website in regards to the community and the relationship with police. And I see that the kind of major recommendation, or the one that came through very strongly, both in the survey and in the reports, is around training. And I know that the Toronto Police Services, they've had significant training on working with the communities, with the diversity of the queer and trans communities up until this point. I remember specifically right after the raid on the Pussy Palace, there were a number of community facilitators who were hired to do training, and significant modules were put forward, and everyone involved with TPS went through that training. So while I recognize that training is important and all the recommendations in the report are important, I'm wondering if those are more Band-Aid type solutions, sort of fixing a broken system instead of changing a broken system. So my thoughts are more around the alternatives to our current justice system and how they could be changed. And I'm wondering if, as a part 2 perhaps of the review commission, that we look at alternative models in detail and then ask the community for their input on which model would work best for them. And like, for example, I mean, during this year with the Black Lives Matters movement, we've heard a lot about taking resources from the current budget and redirecting it towards better mental health services, for example, or having people with expertise in mental illness show up for certain calls, as opposed to having people with no training show up, and not only accidents, but violence and death has occurred as a result. So there's that side of things, kind of the broader issues around police, but specifically with the Bruce McArthur case and the types of relationships that you're looking at, I think looking at an alternative way of conducting police services would be a better focus. Although I'm not trying to discount the recommendations that have come forward, both in the survey and the reports. So that's my comment, and wishing everyone a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. They're great comments and very, very helpful. I wanted to tell you a few things that might be of assistance. The first is that when we commissioned several reports, those reports do not reflect the views of Judge Epstein. Those are simply commissioned reports that she can take into consideration. One of the things that she has been told by a number of members of the community, and which she has taken to heart, is that training alone cannot be an answer to the issues that have been identified. And that's why one of the things that Judge Epstein is looking at is the very thing that you so wisely raised with us, and that is it a time for alternative models in how policing is done? And the other thing that I would say to you, again, without foreshadowing what Judge Epstein's going to say, the other thing is that there have been reports in the past that recommended training. In Thunder Bay, we took a different approach, and we gave very, very detailed recommendations, not only on training, but also on police culture, but also on infusing cultural competencies into promotions, and incentivize the way in which these issues are dealt with within the Toronto Police Service. So I don't want you to be under the impression that because the commission report identified training, that it's the only issue that's being looked at. All of those issues are undoubtedly being issued, including alternative models. Thank you, though.
Great. We're actually open for comments and people to raise their hand. We're all ears. Seems that there's a lot to digest. Gary Kinsman, you're up. Gary, Andrea will enable your microphone. You can also appear on video.
I think I'll just be through audio because my camera's not working properly.
Okay, great.
So everyone's hearing me?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so I wanted to first of all say where I'm coming from, especially given the global uprising against anti-Black racism and anti-Indigenous racism and the police. I am fully in favor of defunding and abolishing the police, and I think that must inform what comes out of this review. But I wanted to raise a particular concern, and I realize with all commissions of inquiry, there's problems around the terms of reference and the limitations they sometimes produce. And I'm glad to see that there's a fairly broad interpretation, it seems, of your terms of reference, and I think that's good. But there's an area that I think is particularly troubling around a whole bunch of these cases, but especially I'm going to refer to the people that MacArthur murdered. When people in our queer and trans communities started to talk about this, started to raise this as an issue, even put posters up in the community around people being missing, when they started to actually talk to each other, people who knew different people who were missing, the police shut that down. The police actively tried to decompose the community response. And given the police had basically left people to die and to be murdered by MacArthur because of their botched investigations and their refusal to recognize there was a serial killer, they actively prevented us as a community and as a movement of people from actually doing what we could have done to provide safety and security for these people. So at least some of them might not have been murdered. And I mean, I think that's a really urgent question that has to be addressed in any sort of review process. That the police in this case, just like in other cases in the past, just like in the Picton case in British Columbia, left people to be killed, left people vulnerable, and then they actually shut down or tried to shut down people in the community trying to organize to provide safety and security for people in our community, which I think once again shows why the police need to be defunded and abolished and why we need to actually develop other community-based forms of providing security and safety for people. I'll just leave it there, but I mean, this obviously taps a lot of emotion and anger and frustration in our communities. And I think it's really important for you to hear that and to also understand that, you know, I was involved in the resistance to the Bath raids in the 1980s. I've been thrown across streets when I was marshalling a demonstration by police officers. I've experienced violence and harassment from the police myself. So I do not think that our friends, that we actually have to develop alternatives to policing is really crucial. I'll just leave it there. Otherwise, I'll go on ranting all night and I'll stop.
Thank you very much, Gary. Noted. There's some people on the list. We can just keep moving down. Jeff McGuire, can we get you on audio and video? Thank you again, Gary. Appreciate it and heartfelt.
Hi there. Sorry, just trying to work through the Zoom stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Hey, thanks very much. And, Justice Epstein, thank you very much. And Mark, Mr. Sandler, you and I have done some work in the past, many years ago.
Yeah, we have.
I'm the executive director of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police and retired from the Toronto Police Service. I probably, unfortunately, in this day and age, I have to say, I'm not actually here representing either one of those entities. So I don't want to speak to the Toronto Police investigation, but on behalf of the chiefs, I just want to thank you for the work that you're all doing. I understand the passion from what we're hearing from people. And when I was with the Toronto Police Service, I think I was one of the first people appointed by Bill Blair as the liaison, senior command liaison to the LGBT community. And I'm perfectly honest, that was one of the most moving moments of my time. I had the opportunity to work with people. Everything didn't go great. I'm not suggesting that, but we did a lot of work and we did a lot of great things. And so I just wanted to say, I guess, a little bit on behalf of the OACP. I represent the chiefs across the province, and we welcome the work that is being done. We want to make things better. I hear the passion from people who are speaking, and we recognize that. I don't dismiss that at all. And we hope that some good and some great changes will come from this. The only thing that I would say, and I hope this is not taken as a negative, but if I were watching this as an individual and I see the slides that we went through, I think the base number was 1,000 respondents. Toronto is a population, and I know you're not relying on that completely. It is a population of 3 million people. And for 1,000, I know you're getting a lot of the people that are directly involved, but please understand that the vast majority of the police officers out there want to do the best. I can tell you the OACP is working very hard on implicit bias testing, trying to improve the people that are involved. So again, my thoughts and prayers go out to all of those people who have been badly impacted by this. And I do know that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of police officers out there that want to make things better. So that's kind of all I have to say for this evening, but thank you very much for the time, and thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right, some people on the list. Nancy, you're next up. Got your hand up. I'm not sure if you're going to join by video and audio, but Andrea is getting you in the gate here. Thank you, everyone, for being really good and understanding at all this Zoom tech.
Nancy, I
Right.
see you've joined. Are you able to say something so we can see if we can hear you? May still be connecting.
Okay. There,
Oh,
Nancy.
there we go. I think she's coming on. One moment. Nancy, if you wouldn't mind just unmuting your, there we go.
Okay, I'm unmuted
Yeah,
and
you
I'm
got
willing to be on the video if I'm on it already, or how do I turn it on?
there's a camera on the bottom left of your
Oh.
screen. You can turn that on.
Start my video.
There
Hang
you
on.
go.
Did that work?
Yes,
there
we
you
can
are.
see you.
Okay, great. We can see me. I'm completely
Hi.
unprepared for this, but I want to say that as a longtime out queer, someone who's been riding a motorcycle in the Pride Parade for years, whose first experience was having the police take notes, my description, take picture of my license plate. That was back in the very early 80s when it was quite, illegal, whether it was legal or not, to be queer. I was at the Pussy Palace bathhouse party, so I got to experience firsthand what those supposed rogue cops did who were or were not supposed to be there. I have had plenty of experiences, but one of the experiences that I have everywhere I go, I am always a woman, I am always white. And what we saw with the police recently was they did not respond to all of the brown men who were disappearing and said things like, oh, they probably tried to straighten out their lives, right, and kind of disappear. It wasn't until one very lovely white man disappeared that the police paid attention. They did not pay attention to two women, and they did not pay attention to all the brown men. And I think we really need to remember that. My ability to actually phone the police and complain, needing help. If I have any situation, a traffic situation, any kind of violence in anything, I can phone the police because I'm white. I have a much better ability to call the police and feel safe. People whose skin is not white do not have the same privilege. And I now, after what I have witnessed and what has been really brought to my attention through Black Lives Matter and other groups like Not Another Black Life, it has become really clear to me that only white people have the privilege of calling the police for help. And this is why the defund movement is so important, because we really need people who we can call for help, who our community, queers, or people of any color but white, can call when they need help. Mental health is something, apparently there's one mental health unit on the entire Toronto police force. So that would be one. So if you call with a mental health crisis, which many of us have, and by the way, COVID has not made things easier on anyone who I know, except for maybe the owner of Amazon. We really need a community, a society that has support. And so the idea of removing 80% of the budget that the police have and shifting that towards other creations that do not lead to prison, for example, I think is a really brilliant plan. And I would look to Black and Indigenous people to learn about this, because they are the ones who are way worse off than I am. And being queer, it used to be you would never call the cops in the 80s if you were queer. And I'm just saying, you know what, still queer, but I'm still white. And so I have so much privilege, and we're a bunch of white people talking here. Really, if our skin was different, our abilities would just change so dramatically. And that, I think, is the most important thing that we need to recognize. When you look trans, when you look Black, when you look queer, the police, it ain't training that they need. They've been trained. After the Pussy Palace, they put off training. It seemed like it was 4 years after they lost the human rights case. They put off being trained, put it off. Finally, they all got their training. And here we're talking years later, they've been trained. They actually need to get a different job, not dealing with the public with guns. Like I'm serious, 80% of those people, they need to go do some other job. And we need to bring in 80% new people who are actually people who would be compassionate and support a community. And those people need to be Black and Indigenous heavily. They all need to represent the community that they live in and that they serve. So we need a demographic that represents, and that means women too. A 50% female service of public safety and mental health support, 50% women. A demographic that represents the city that it serves. And if I sound angry, I am.
Thank
So
you,
there you
Nancy. Absolutely on point. Thank you. Of course, it's emotional, and really appreciate you coming and saying it like it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, off to England. The name on the screen is England 12345. So maybe you're from across the pond, or maybe you're just got a pretty cool name. Either way, you're up. We want to hear from you, and maybe see you as well. That is an option. England, calling England 3532. It must be incredibly late in England right now. What, 7 hours? That just put us well into the 3 a.m. zone.
Right, we just had that individual drop off the list here, so maybe having some technical issues.
I see a hand up by someone from the Toronto Bi Network. We could get you on the microphone now. And camera, if you have that ability or desire.
Hi, I'm sorry. I actually didn't mean to join on the Toronto By Network.
Okay.
I meant to join as myself, but there you go, outed.
It's not coming out, Dave.
We won't tell anybody.
It's all good.
Just us cats.
So my name's Tara. I live in the Church Wellesley Village. I'm listening to what everyone said. I've read the report. I think there's already been a lot of discussion around intersectionality, around, you know, queer identities, trans identities, Black, Brown, Indigenous people. There hasn't been a lot of talk, but, you know, also something to consider definitely is the place of sex work and the way sex workers are treated within our justice system. But the one thing that I really want to talk about actually is the LGBTQ2S+ police committees and transparency around that. So that's one thing that's in the review that we haven't talked a lot about. For example, who's on those committees? How are they selected? You know, I've seen in the past that sometimes the people who are on the committee are kind of asked to join by people in the police services. So I'm just wondering how to get better representation on those committees of people who are actually making important recommendations for our community. So I guess I have questions around, you know, will those committees be changed or amended in some way? You know, part of this report is actually talking about, you know, changes and restitutions kind of by and for the people. So how would that mechanism work? And what kind of transparency are people gonna, are you gonna start publicly posting minutes from the meeting? Will they be open for other people to attend? Because I feel like that's a little bit of a piece. Like a lot of times people want to talk about either like, you know, what's happening in an organization or what's happening outside of it. These are pieces where those things are happening together and in conjunction, and there's very little understanding. I mean, when's the last time they even met? I think it's been quite a few months. So if anyone has any input, if you don't, I understand. I'm asking a lot of very specific questions, but I think that that's an important piece to kind of discuss. Thank you.
So thank you for your comments. Great comments. As I said to you, I'm not going to tell you what Judge Epstein is going to say, but I am going to tell you that one of the subheadings in the recommendations has to do with the very topic that you raised. So how are these committees created? Who makes the decisions as to who's on the committee? What role, if any, should police play on the committee? What role should the committees play in the true decision-making that by police? To what extent is there transparency around who's on the committees? To what extent is the community involved in the decision-making around who populates the committees? All of those are issues that we're going to wrestle with in the report. So thank you for your comment. They're right on point and they're important issues.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Richard Elliott, I see that you have your hand up. I'm not sure if you still want to speak, but do you have the mic? We would welcome your comments in this context, Richard. There you go. Maybe we can even get a little peek at Richard. Don't be shy. We know you. But
hi,
there he is. We recognize him.
Thanks
Hi,
for
Richard.
the opportunity to contribute. Nice, and thank you, Justice Epstein, and thank you, Mark and Jane. I just wanted to pick up on a comment that Anthony Mohammed made near the top of the discussion and underscore that when we're talking about a number of communities that have a fairly fraught relationship with the police, we can't forget the reason why, or part of the reason why that relationship is so fraught, and that is that at the moment, the specter of criminalization hangs over a good number of communities, whether it's still LGBTQ2S people in too many circumstances, people who use drugs, people who are selling sex, And police are the front line for the enforcement of criminalization. And so it's not surprising that people will hesitate to turn to police. And it's not surprising that in too many instances, when confronted with communities that they have been tasked with criminalizing for so long, police don't necessarily respond in the best and most constructive way possible. So if we are to improve that relationship, which I think is absolutely important, then we need to actually recommend some more profound structural change, and that is to take the tool of punishing and prosecuting out of the hands of police and of the legal system more generally. So, and unless and until we actually get rid of that specter of criminalization, there is going to be always present a barrier to trust, to effective investigation, because people don't want to share information when the information that they share can put people in legal jeopardy, and when the people with whom they might consider sharing it, who might be able to find someone who may have come to some sort of unfortunate circumstance, are in a position where they are expected to enforce a criminal prohibition, or are certainly encouraged to do so in many instances. So I would really encourage you, Justice Epstein, in the final report to not only make recommendations about training, the limitations of which I think a number of people have spoken, and you're, I'm sure, very well aware, or better use of technology or greater transparency, all of which, you know, have their role to play. But I think training and technology and transparency initiatives and so on can only go so far unless we actually look at some more profound structural change that is driving some of the attitudes, and also just, unfortunately, the position that people are in when they're interacting with police. So I would urge you to go that far in your recommendations, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Richard, it's good to see you again. It's good to hear from you. Can you believe it? I think over a year and a half since we had an opportunity to exchange, or you were sharing your views, and I was listening then as I'm listening now. And I do remember our conversation very clearly. And make no mistake, everything is remembered, it's written down, it's summarized, and we are taking all of these considerations into perspective as we work on our findings and come up with recommendations that are not only going to be responsive to the issues, but also are enforceable. And one of the things that I think probably I should have said in my comments about Mark is he has established a wonderful reputation for being creative when it comes to helping the reviewer with recommendations that have teeth to them. So, but thank you for your views and for supporting the review a year and a half ago and joining us again tonight. And you, as always, make a good point.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we will go to Tiffany, who has her hand up, their hand up. Tiffany, we're open. We hope you are connecting, and we're going to hear from you. I see you showing up there.
Hi, good evening. How are you?
I'm good, Tiffany. It's great to hear from you. So what's your comment?
So, good evening. Thank you for having this forum. I just found out about it just recently. I identify as an Indigenous Two-Spirited community member of Toronto. Awesome. And I'm really excited about this report and the recommendations that is going to support the Two-Spirited Indigenous community in Toronto. Specifically, I'm actually planning on presenting at the Aboriginal Advisory Committee on Friday to speak to a motion or a pilot project that was created with police and Native Child and Family Services, because I feel, again, I was listening to the comments, that true community consultation hasn't really been done. And I hope that when I go to the committee to suggest and make a recommendation that there should be an advisory community committee to oversee what is happening within the Indigenous Advisory Committee. It's like you need a community committee to oversee the committee, because without true community consultation, I feel personally that setting up the police to work with an Indigenous agency to come to your house without even creating a reconciliation on so many levels, I think we're setting up not only our families, but we're setting up our people. And that hurts me. And that's why I'm going to speak at this advisory committee, because, you know, I always envision that there should be an Indigenous mobile crisis response team to meet our needs. There is none that helps Two-Spirited and children and youth. And so what I'm happy to see through the report and what you've shared is that our relations in what we have with police, it's very fragmented, especially when it comes to missing and murdered Indigenous women. But how we are responding to support our Indigenous Two-Spirited youth and our adults, and most importantly, how are we really supporting our trans Two-Spirited? Because I feel we're not honoring them, and we must have the voice. And we won't have the voice until we are able to allow our people to speak. And our voices are already being oppressed, sadly, by our own people. But I think these type of reports, I hope, would include that true community consultation, true, must take place. And I hope that the advisory committee will work together with the Two-Spirited, because we're totally out of the box and not even included in anything. And more. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Could I just to get clarification, the committee that you're talking about, is that something between Native Child Services, Family Services, and the Toronto Police Services?
So I'm going to
the committee that you're referring to. I just want to get that clear for to capture your feedback accurately.
So what I'm doing is I'm going to speak at the Toronto Aboriginal Advisory Committee, which is through the City of Toronto.
Right.
But there's already a project model in place that is already kind of it's going to have Native Child and 43 Division do like work together to come to your house when you're in crisis. But without that true consultation, we wouldn't have agreed to that, because my model doesn't include the police, right? It wouldn't have included the police in any way, but without true consultation, I wouldn't have known that these things are going on at the advisory committee and these decisions are being made, because they're not telling us. We don't know when the meetings are, they're not being transparent. So it puts us like behind closed doors, because we would have not known. And if we did, of course we would speak up. I'm speaking to it. I'm the only person, but I think that this report reflects, by all the people that you've spoken to and worked with, that there's still a stigma attached to police and the responses and how we support people in crisis, missing, all of that needs to be refined by community for community, by our people. Yeah, that's where I'm at. But thank you for letting me share.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much for that important clarification that we can follow up.
Miigwech,
Miigwech.
Okay, the last person we're going to hear from is England 12345. Before we have a concluding remark from Judge Epstein. So if we can get England 12345 on the mic, that will take us to time pretty much. Hopefully we can make that connection. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, it appears we're having some technical issues in having that speaker come online here.
Okay. All right, then. I think that pretty much takes us to time. There's a few minutes left. Albert Wenzel is the last person I see now. Albert, you have the microphone for a brief remark. We welcome you. Hello, Albert.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey there. All right, you have the mic.
Oh,
what's your
okay.
comment?
Thanks for taking my question. I do have a comment. How would a novel technique like remote viewing get any funding or ever be taken seriously? RV does work to find missing persons and predict events. I have sent out correct information all over the world many times. No one does nothing. My second question is over jurisdiction. And I mean, UFOs, free energy, exotic topics. Police have no jurisdiction over it. How would I get them to crack a case? I've put it under their nose. I said, put it on chief's letterhead, sent to UN, NASA, NATO, Space Force. The problem is no reply. 0 Point Energy is working. No one does nothing again.
All right. Well, Albert, thank you very much. I think we've captured that comment. And I'm going to turn it over to Judge Epstein for a final reflection and comment.
Oops, I've got a.
There you go.
It works. First of all, thank you so much, Jane. You ran a tight ship here, and I'm, as always, impressed. And I sat here and I thought, wow, I don't know how Jane does it, but you do manage to do it. You manage to do it well. So thank you very much for guiding us through this. And I'd like to thank everyone who participated, those who spoke and those who didn't speak, but we're here to listen and learn about what we are doing and learn from others in terms of their response and what input they were able to provide. One of the things that was most important to me when I started this is that I have a personal connection with everybody who wanted to, who was interested in the review, had something to say, had something to share. COVID interfered with that recently, but we've certainly done our best since then, and everybody's been very accommodating. And to this evening, it means a lot to me that you took time out of your evening to share this hour and a half with the review and for the review. So I also want to thank you for your candor, for your suggestions. This is really exactly what we were hoping for, exactly. So I'm quite touched, and I've learned a lot, and the review will be better for it. I know that everyone is anxious to get going, so let me finish on a quick personal note. I mentioned earlier the importance of needing to understand the whys of what has gone on in order to correctly identify the whats of what has to be done, simply put, to make things better. And your input tonight has helped me a great deal with that understanding. And getting to the personal part, it has certainly reinforced my decision to leave the court and head up this review. It was a tough decision, but when I look back, it was the right decision at the right time. And I think, quite frankly, with the defunding conversation, that very powerful overlay that has affected the review's work more recently, it's really made the challenges we face that much more interesting and that much more important. So it's quite a privilege to be part of this. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. And I also hope that I can get a report to you that will answer the questions you've raised tonight, and more important than that, make a difference. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge Epstein. Mark Sandler, thank you very much for everything, the presentation, the information, all the Q&A tonight. Really, really great information. And Andrea, thanks for the help. And thank you everyone for coming. It has been a pleasure to do this work, and thank you for persevering through the tech as well. So I think that's it. We're gonna adjourn now. Mark, you can say goodbye. Are you unmuted, Mark? There you are.
Uncharacteristically, I'm unmuted. Thank you, everybody, and I very much appreciate all the comments that have been made. Take care.
All right. Thank you, everyone.